week, I still owed you an answer to a question. I put in a question to my Rebbe relating to whether, if you follow the position of the Raman, you could control for the issue of the heat adjusting in an oven. Would the logical conclusion of following that lenient opinion allow one to, if your food had been in during the oven during Bein Hashmashos and then you pulled it out, could you then put it back in again, assuming there's no heat readjustment issues? If there are, then it's nothing to talk about here. So I'm waiting for an answer. I did put in an ask on that one. I'm not sure if it's taking us a few days off or something like that. I don't know where, but as soon as I get an answer, I'll share it with you even via email. I didn't want you to think I forgot that question. Okay, now we left off. We were about to finish the Ramah's comments in Sif Beis last week, where he turns his attention to the Talmudic tanur. Again, not our tanur. Our ovens today in halacha are compared to a kira, and the Talmudic tanur came with a lot of restrictions. Okay, so let's read. We're in my edition. It's the third line of the page, page Kaf Gimel. It's right after the Mishnah Berurah parentheses that from Sif Katan Ayin Ches. So let's read. Uve tanur ein chiluk. Bein lahachzir alav o lismoch etzlo. V'dafka b'makom sheyad salat espo. When it comes to the Talmudic tanur, there is no differentiation whatsoever to return it to the oven, on top of the oven, forgetting inside. On top of the oven, however, the Talmudic tanur, wide bottom, narrow top with an opening there, one spot that you could put a pot on top of it. Perhaps maybe you could put things down into it. That's very possible, but certainly you could put only one pot on top of this Talmudic tanur, and you were not allowed to return things to that spot under any circumstances, right? Just similar to Shahiyah didn't work, with a tanur, when even if you could assure that it was a grufu ktuma, you had raked the coals properly to the side, or you had covered them with ashes, it didn't matter, because the tanur was so hot that they were still worried you were just going to just play with it a little bit, and all that would make all the difference in this tanur, because there was such a high level of heat. So here we have the same thing with chazar. There's no difference. No, you can't really do this. Or even to put it next to the tanur, right? When we talked about with smicha, putting something next to the fire, not on top of the fire. When it comes to a kira, not a problem at all. We had just said the previous from last week. The previous comment was lismoch. Right? If you go back one line in the Ramah, about lismoch, afilu samuch la'esh v'makom sheyad tzladas bo shari. That's not a problem at all. Afilu samuch la'chashecha, even if it's close to dark. Remember we were talking about the opinion of maybe Chazara applies also Erev Shabbos, shortly before Shabbos, if there's not enough time to reheat it. That was the whole thing about Tosfos and the Rush, which again, I don't think that is our practice today. It's certainly not the practice that is recorded here by the Ramah. I don't think we follow that position. But nonetheless, smicha worked here. And by the way, they should Mishnah Berurah had pointed out that Samuch Chashecha is Afila b'Shabbos Shari. By the way, it's not even close to Shabbos. Even on Shabbos, you could put something near a fire, even a liquid, presumably, as long as it hasn't cooled down. Because if that spot is Siyad Saletas Bo, it's going to really start to heat it up. It's fine, as long as it's not at room temperature when you return it to the fire, or here to the side of the fire. But when it comes to a tanur, there's no discussion to be had here. Aval ein hayad saletas sham. Now, this should not be a shocking statement whatsoever. If the heat level next to the tanur is such that you could measure the temperature, and or without having a thermometer, what they would do is, would your hand sort of be, have to, almost naturally pull away because you don't want to burn yourself? If you ein hayad soledes sham, so shari afilu b'Shabbos, even on Shabbos is fine. What are we talking about? You're talking about something that's not even going to heat anything up, by the way. If it's not that hot that you could, okay, maybe you'll get a tiny bit hot. I don't know. Maybe it'll take the chill off of it if it came from the refrigerator, but you're not heating it up. If you left it out, it would also get room temperature at a certain point. So afilu b'Shabbos, even on Shabbos, that's quite fine. As we will talk about when we get to Shinyan Ches and the laws of Bishul. Okay, so this is one comment from the Mishnah Berurah here. Ayin Ches uvetanur ein chiluk hainu betanur shel zman haTalmud. As I clarified already, we're talking about the Talmud from the Talmudic times. From the Talmudic times. Ukvar kosuv ze b'shulchan aruch b'sif aleph. This is something we already discussed at the beginning of this siman, and Ela Desham Ma'ir Shahia, but we talked about the Tanur in the context of Shahia previously. The Khan Ma'ir Chazara. Why are we sort of reintroducing once again a stringency by the Tanur? Because here we're talking about Chazara, so there was Shahia, there it's Chazara. Okay, so it's not a true repetition. And here comes the just an important point. Aval Tanurim Shalanu, our ovens today. Shipsuchim in Hatzad, which open from the side, right? We don't have the ovens that open from the top. Maybe we've all learned something here over this number of weeks that just historically their ovens open from the top, which is interesting. I don't know. I assume that we made progress in this, and that's why it's come from this. We open the oven from the side now, but that wasn't always the case. But our ovens open from the side, and therefore. Heim kikira. They are treated like a kira. Why is that the case? Our ovens can get very hot. We can control the temperature in a way that perhaps they couldn't. I assume they could get their ovens pretty hot. By the way, you can get enough wood underneath, fuel underneath. You light it on fire. I don't doubt that it could have gotten very, very, very hot. But I can also self-clean my oven at 900 degrees. So I can get my oven very hot too. Why is it different? I think the answer is that when we think about the ancient tanur, right, and it becomes very narrow, and again the heat rises, and if you enclose that top part, you have a very narrow focus for where the heat is going. Our ovens actually ventilate, and I think by law, if I'm not mistaken, in order for safety, for I think there's carbon monoxide reasons, if I'm not mistaken. You all correct me if I'm wrong, but there has to be a certain ventilation that is built into every oven by law. And again, when you open it from the side, right, the whole thing is open, right? When you talk about the opening from the top, the way it's described in the ancient kira and the ancient tanur, it's not like heat would have escaped quite as easily as it does from our ovens. So yes, we can get them very hot, but we can also cool them down very quickly. It's a very different contraption. So that's why they're considered a little bit more like kira, because I think there's more ventilation and there's more of an ability for these ovens to cool down. Yes, we can get them very hot, but they can also cool down quicker than I think that the ancient tanur, which had a very narrow top, could cool down. Okay, let's continue on to see. If there's questions, so basically talk about Chazara. We really gave it a thorough treatment. So again, we just to review where we are here, right? We talked about, I'll give you just the bottom line here. When it comes to Erev Shabbos and kind of talking about Shahiyah, about food that is being prepared from Erev Shabbos into Shabbos, the bottom line for Ashkenazim, and I'm not paskening for Sfardim here, the bottom line is, as long as your food is half or a third cooked, it's Kamachal Ben Drusai, as Shabbos is entering, even if it's on the fire, it's currently cooking right now, it's on your stovetop, and the fire is on, the oven is on, not a problem, except you have to make sure that, Actually, there's not a problem at all. Now, how are you going to turn the flame off afterwards? That's a problem you have to deal with. I don't know. You're going to leave the burner on all 25 hours of Shabbos. That's probably not a smart idea. But the other way is if you have something that's grufa, you have a cooking situation where it's grufa ketuma. You cover the dials and the knobs and whatnot. That could be the shema yachata begechol. I won't stoke the coals or change the temperature. Doesn't matter where you are in the cooking process. You could be in between that awful zone of raw and a third cooked, where you're in no man's land, but it's still okay if it's grufa ketuma. So really, shahi is not going to be such an issue that plays heavily into our lives. Chazara is more because the reality is that we need to eat lunch the next day. And so the bottom line with chazara is that if you have food on the fire, it's been sitting there since when Shabbos started, and you want to return it to the fire, so there are certain, right over the fire, right on the blech. It has to have certain conditions that are met. It has to still be hot, which the Ramah sort of pulled back all the way to saying as long as it's not room temperature, has to be in your hand, has to be don't put it down on the ground, have to be, have in mind that I want to put it back. And if you meet these conditions, not a problem. This comes up most frequently with the cholent, as I mentioned, at least in my life. You want to take some of the cholent, give some of it again to maybe your children who are hungry for lunch and they want to eat at 11. The company's not coming over till 12:30 because Rabbi Klinger spoke too long in shul that day and said it was kiddush so I take it off. I have all these conditions met. I give my kids. I put it back on the heating element. Not a problem whatsoever. Except you have to cover the knobs. You have to cover the dial. So if you have a dial on your crock pot, right? You have to. What I do is I take some tiny little piece of foil. I put it on top. I put a piece of tape. Done. That's it. You don't have to do more than that. And then that's grufa ketuma for our modern day purposes. And now chazara is on the table. If you don't have grufa ketuma, forget it. There's nothing to talk about in the discussion of chazara. Unlike by shahiyah, where you can get away with it, so long as it's at least kamachal ben drusai cooked. Now, in terms of reheating it in other ways, which we're more familiar with, that brings us to this next topic. Okay, is everyone ready to rock and roll here? Sif Gimel. Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Some are electric, and some are gas. I have electric
ovens.
Yeah. What about the oven?
Yeah.
Do you treat the electric?
There should be no difference between electric and gas. No difference.
No difference.
There may be practical, differences in terms of there's an actual flame versus there's a heating element. I don't know that a blech on top of one of those stoves which just has the circle cutouts, is going to really.
Mine's in the glass.
Right. So that's going to be harder. See, like that way, putting it directly on the fire. If you have one of those glass stove tops, to me, that's putting it directly on the aish. Obviously, you're not going to end up adjusting the flame because you put it on top, as opposed to an actual fire there, or they'll end up playing with the fire there. But you have the knobs to play with. So, that would be like putting it on the fire. You have to have a different situation to be able to put it back. So take a look. Ready? Next thing is going to help us here with this. Okay, Sif Gimel. So we made it to Sif Gimel. Here we go. Hamashkim is a very real life problem. I'm not even saying that tongue in cheek. This is a problem that we deal with today, but it's not like we have new problems when it comes to the following. Hamashkim baboker, you wake up on Shabbos morning, and you see the food is burning, and it's going to keep burning. By the time the lunch comes, the family gets back from shul, forget it. It'll be a goner. I could maybe save it right now. So it's starting to burn. So what should I do? How do I save this? But I also want it to be hot. I don't want it to be cold when everybody comes back home from shul and they want to serve lunch. How do I save it so that it retains its heat, but it doesn't burn? So yachol lahasiru lahaniach kedera yishana reikanis. al pi hakira. Ve'az yosim hakadera she'atavshil v'sofa al gabe hakadera reikonis. So he says you can remove the pot and then place an old pot. And we'll talk about why this is the case. This is mostly relevant in our day and age. Place an old pot that is, he claims here, empty. It's empty. And then what do I do? Okay, I'll pi akira, as yasi, and then I put it on top of the kira. So I have, the hole where the kira is, the heat emerges from. I should take an empty pot and place it on top of the kira. And then take my food that I was worried I was going to burn, that the food is in it, and put it on top of the empty pot. The Zohar says here you should be careful. Don't put your pot down al gabe karka. Don't put it down, and make sure it should still be, literally means boiling, but we've talked about that maybe it doesn't have to be literally boiling. As he mentions here in the parentheses, as the Ramah mentions, we've already mentioned that the custom was to be lenient even put it down on the karka, on the ground, because if you follow that ran, that the chazara only applies if the food was off the fire on Erev Shabbos. Sorry, you took it off Erev Shabbos and then you replaced it on Shabbos. That's when the conditions of chazara apply. So then if you remove it on Shabbos and then replace it on Shabbos, you don't need to worry about putting it on the karka, on the ground, and the other conditions as well. Okay. This is what you should do if you have a pot that is it looks like it's not going to make it.
So you're just putting one pot inside the other. You're not emptying the first pot.
You're not emptying it. No, you're taking a pot. I imagine here, for some reason when I think back to learning this, probably 10 years ago, in Shir, I recall sort of thinking that you're supposed to really kind of the idea here would be to take an empty pot and put it almost upside down over top of it. I don't know, by the way, Steve Keller, does your edition of the Mishnah Berurah have pictures in it of what this looks like?
No pictures.
I believe it's the idea here is that you would take the pot, you flip it, you take an empty pot. That way your pot could sit on the pot lid of the other one. It is a possibility. Though in order to get the heat, you don't want it to be, I don't know, I guess the heat is coming up, from the pot, even if it's sort of facing the regular way. But if it's upside down, so you've just created you've distanced the heat source from, I'm not sure, maybe it makes more sense if it's just right side up. The bottom line is you're putting something in here that is going to diminish the heat in the pot where the food is, no doubt, by just having this second layer of transfer. The heat's going to transfer to the first pot, and then a lower level of heat will ultimately transfer to the second pot, thus keeping it, the idea here being keeping it warm, but not burning it. That's the thought here. Let's take a look at the first comment of the Mishnah Berurah here. What's going on with this Yeshana, that there has to be an old pot? Why an old pot? I have to use a pot that's 2 years old. How old does the pot have to be? I have to have celebrated a birthday at least. Why am I having an old pot? Because the old pot, always gets the job done. What's going on here? So ayin test. This is afilu chadasha, but a new one, aval chadasha, a new pot would not be allowed. Why not? So you have to remember. What was that?
The metal is still being short.
Good. Does everyone could hear that, right? Everyone heard Lloyd? No. No. Oh, you didn't hear. Okay, good. Say it louder. I want to make sure this works.
In a new pot, metal continues to be cured.
Okay, everyone got that? In a new pot, it continues to be cured. Absolutely. So you have an ancient pot. Our pots today, the Bishop is going to point this out. This doesn't apply in our pots today. But you have a pot that was, some pottery work. The more if it's a new pot, it hasn't been used yet. When you heat it up, or directly over the fire, that's how you sort of finish. You continue to finish the product, right? It becomes a more firm product, a firm pot, and the word Lloyd had used was you cure it more? Is that the technical term here? Okay, and it's
Is that only for a metal pot? Supposing you're using ceramic?
I don't know what Lloyd. What do you think here? That would be for metal only or ceramic too?
In my mind, it's definitely metal.
Metal for sure. Yeah.
Ceramic, glass, I mean.
Maybe for
metal.
those it wouldn't make a difference, but
I don't know. I went to a clay thing once, and it's basically once it's glazed,
it's done.
it's done. I think, and I'm not an expert.
Right.
All this
I'm
is-
not holding it against you.
But metal is a different story.
Right. No, for sure. So here we have us. So let's even by the way, you just imagine it's a just imagine it's even if it's just metal here. So this is going to finish the product. It's going to make it into, right? That's why he's saying here, Vanasis Kli Gemura. You're finishing it. This is the Makaba Patish, which is one of the 39 malachos. If you finish making a product, you put literally the Makaba Patish means you make the last blow of the hammer on the product. You say, whoa, what did I do wrong? You finish making the product. So here's a separate problem unrelated to cooking. But if you put a new pot over the fire, you are in some ways finishing that product. That was the fear here. But the Mishnah Berurah points out, then I believe this is undoubtedly true. Kadero Shalanu, our pots, even the metal pots. Shikvar Nigmar Tikunan, they're finished products. Va'asiyasan betanor shel yotzer, they were made by the Yotzer. Those are the people who form. This reminds me of the piyut on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur night, right? That God is the Yotzer, right? God is he's the fashioner of the. These are made by experts. This is, if your pot goes on the fire for the first time and it changes shape, you might want to call and get a refund. Right? That's what that's not supposed to happen with our pots today. So if you're in a bind, you can use a new pot. You don't have to use an old pot, when you're sort of playing out this halacha. Okay, that's why Kedera Yishana. Now, let's go to Pei Aleph, which is Al Pi Hakira. You put this empty pot on top of the kira. The Havele Kira Kigrufa Uktuma. Shahare Hakadera Sosemes Espi Hakira. Umemela Mutter Acharkach Lahasim Aleha Hakadera Shatav Shel Besof. Uchadel El da Chazar Al Gabe Grufa Uktuma Mutter. Now, this is some fancy footwork. He says here, why is this okay? I take the pot, I put the empty pot, I take the pot off, I slide an empty pot underneath, and all is well and good. Why does this work? So he says, when I put the empty pot there, it's like Grufo Ktum. It's like I raked the coals and I covered the coals with ashes. How so? Because he says, because the pot closes off the opening of the kira, of this ancient, oven structure, which had two holes on top. So let's say you're only using one of the holes in this example, right? You have now closed it off. Okay. Umemela, and therefore, by virtue of closing it off, now I have questions here because I don't fully get this, because when you put the pot on it itself, you could probably close up that hole. You know what I'm saying? Like once you put think about your regular soup pot. If you put a soup pot on top, it closes it, right? It's not, I imagine, it's unless we're imagining a huge empty pot that, covers the hole. And a regular pot could never cover the hole, but it has to go down. I have that question is still hanging here. I don't have a good answer to that. Nevertheless, he says it covers the whole of the kira. And therefore, after you put this empty pot there, it is permissible to place lahasim aleha, to put on top of it the pot in which the food was. Now, where is this here? What's the spot? as we said, as we mentioned before, the chazara, you could do chazara as long as the fire upon which it is being returned is grufo ketuma. It has to be have that condition event that it's mutter. He says here lefiza, and so according to this, hu adin gam betanurim shalanu. This would be the case by our ovens as well. Kisha'esh b'sofa. Gam kein shari litain lamala al gabe ma'aziva shel al hatanur. I can place it on top of the fires on the inside. Notwithstanding our whole question that I put in the shaila about the whole inside thing, which my gut is that the answer is no. I just can't explain why it's no. That you pushed me to a point where I didn't understand how to say no in a way that is, if I want to be honest, if the answer is maybe yes, so the answer is yes. But here he's talking about putting it on top of our oven, right, which we call a blech. Right, that's all it is. A ma'aziva. What, Steve, do they give you a definition for the word in yours for ma'aziva?
No, and I was looking because I don't know.
Okay,
I didn't come across it either.
So here's one of the I'm looking it up right now. Hold on 1 second. I want to
Seems to mean a barrier.
from the context, right? I just want to make sure I translate this. I don't want to do any funny business tricks here. Ma'aziva. Okay. Here in the Jastrow dictionary, a ma'aziva is a concrete of stone chippings or clay used for paving floors, pavement for covering the ceiling, to form a concrete for fortification purposes. Okay, so you're talking about here like again, the way I'm understanding this, you're talking about a layer of a sheet of something. So if you have here, maybe it's even just highlighted the top of the oven, right? It's just, it's that top layer. Okay, so he says here, according to this, in our ovens, betanur shalanu, where the ash is on the inside of the oven, it should be okay to put it on top of the oven, or just on top, gabe ma'aziva shalatanur, so on top of the top part, the top board of the oven, right? So I'm not board, I'm not made out of wood, obviously, but let's say a metal sheet. Kevin, why? Ma'aziva mafsik ben akadera, uveresh the ma'aziva, this top sheet on top between the stove top, what we call, and the oven, is a mafsik. It's a barrier between the fire and the pot that I want to heat up. Now, if I on the bottom of mine, the translation of a kachlein is a type of tanur, min tanur chimum, that heats up shahayu me alav, that shayu alav obedofe defanosav bate kibul. You can place things either on top or in the thickness of the walls. There are bate kibul, meaning a place where you could place something there. So again, I'm imagining here there's a place where you can, there's a cutout, there's an insert, put it, on top of the oven. There's spaces where you can put a pot. And again, I've never seen such an oven. I don't know if this sounds like anything familiar to anybody in their life. I know do you have a drawing, Steve, by the way, in yours? I don't know. I'm not sure what the kachlin in the tanur is. The kachlin in the tanur. I guess that would maybe it's
Mine defines it as a cooking compartment
within the oven.
Yeah.
Maybe it's inside the oven, but it's its own layer, own level, something like that.
He says here, halal me'al gag hatanur, hamishemesh lahanachat dvarim lechinumam. Just
like it sounds like you're putting it on top of the oven. Yeah. But they're almost like there are cutouts. That's what I was describing before. It's almost like a cutout. Imagine if we have today a stove top where our burners put things up. Imagine if it was depressed down, and then you could put a pot into the depression in the top of the oven, and because there's heat pumping up from underneath, it heats it up that way. I never seen such a structure of an oven, but okay, in theory that should be okay because it's the fire is below and this is on top.
I'm trying to visualize this. You have a pot, put the other pot inside of another pot.
You're going to put it in the way that the case of the Shulchan Aruch is to put it on top of a pot. A pot on top of a pot.
I'm looking at a pot.
Mhm.
It's on the. Is that what you're talking about?
Let's say it's on top of it.
So when you put the other part in, you're saying it goes in upside down.
I could imagine it being upside down because it's easier to put the
Whatever
second
it
pot on
is,
top. But
what happens as a hand?
and as long as you can make it all balanced, it doesn't make
How
a
do you
difference.
put it?
It's already almost burning the food. You don't want it to be cooked. It's already cooked. You want it to
So
just
wait a
not
minute,
burn.
but this is the part I'm trying to visually understand. Forgive me. So it's cooked, the food's cooking, you put the pot
Mhm.
into there, so it cools it off. What is it doing? 'Cause
It will put a barrier between the high heat and the food, thus ensuring that it won't burn. That's the whole point.
So it's like a crock pot. I'm trying to figure this out. So in my head,
It's just a pot,
it's a pot.
just another
Yeah,
average
wow.
everyday pot.
I don't know.
Okay. Oh, sorry. You want to say?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to say that you're inverting one pot over the other. Because if the food is burning, you want to remove it from the heat source. So you want
So
to,
you want to create a little more of a barrier.
right, you
Yeah.
want to put the,
Yeah. So it could be that that's what you're doing here.
Pot
You're
with
just
the
putting a regular
food.
pot and then you're
Right.
doing a second pot on top of it. Yeah. No, I admit that very much is.
If it was upside down, then you wouldn't need to say it had to be empty. Because it'd be obvious.
good point.
Good one, Steve. You got me. Steve's good. That's good.
What about being empty?
He pointed out it has to be facing up because of the point it has to be an empty. He said it has to be an empty pot. An upside down pot is by definition empty. Yeah.
Unless something,
Unless you have a sticky substance in there.
right,
Right. Yeah.
or something has actually burned itself on.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that's what they're talking about here. Steve's right. Very good. Excellent, Steve. Points. Okay. Achen b'maharil isa de tzarich lahafsik sham al hama'aziva ve'ez eitz odaf lehekera v'yasim hakadera aleh. This is going to sound like the blech that maybe I don't know if some of you use this today or when you were younger or in your families where you grew up. This is what they did, but the Maharil says that you need to create a hafsaka barrier on top of the maziv, meaning that the top layer, forget the grates on top of your stove top. Just imagine there's the metal. Now you'll say, okay, how can I put it there? Because there's the thingy that sticks out, that makes it hard for me. Imagine that's not there either. You have a layer. Imagine you could put a pot there, and let's say the fire under, that's underneath the oven is able to transmit heat. He says, I don't like that directly on top of the of this, ma'aziva. Rather, what you should do is create a hafsaka with be'eza eitz odaf, with a piece of a board or a lost my spot, or a daf, right? You have to have some barrier lehekera, so that people should take notice. What should they notice, by the way? I think the answer is they should take notice that you're not cooking, right? And this is a space where you cook. We do cook on top of our ovens, but in order to create the impression that we're not cooking, I assume that's what's going on here. Lahekera, v'yasim hakadera aleha. Then put the pot on top of that. V'chein mashma b'sof hasimin baraman. So when we get to the end of the siman, this seems to be something that the Ramah describes as well. That there should be a layer of barrier still yet to come. The Ayin Magid Avraham, the Sof Siman Reish Nun Tes, the Dine Shehiyah v'Hatmana, and we'll get to some more laws about Shehiyah and Hatmana in the context of actually muktzah related to those two topics. Shehed, that's in Reish Nun Tes. Shehed gam kein kemaril. He seems to also follow the Maharil's opinion that there should be some board that's in the way on top of not just the ma'aziva, the top of the oven, but there should be something on top of that. If there is something recognizable that is separating then mutar afil litein lechatchila b'Shabbos, you could put it there even lechatchila on Shabbos. Now the word here litein lechatchila b'Shabbos is a much more loaded term. What is litein lechatchila b'Shabbos? I think that means you could just without the conditions of chazara, then you could even perhaps put it there, right? That's it wouldn't. This isn't again. If that's how it's to be read. The ilav hachi asur mishum bishul im yuchal lehischamem sheyeh hayad selesbo. But again, if we're talking about a liquid, and the liquid this is only if the liquid is not yet room temperature. The liquid is room temperature, so then we've talked about that there is still bishul that can take place, and that's a separate problem. You can set up you could do group hukatuma and put 3 pots on top of each other and put the soup on top of that. If it heats up, if it can get hot, I don't know if that can happen with 3 pots, but that would be a problem of bishul, okay? Because when it comes to liquids, we don't apply the principle of bishul achar. Bishul, at least be the rabbanon. I don't know if midal raisa we would say that you have to bring a chatas, you have to bring a sin offering if one did this, in the Beis Hamikdash. But no doubt, at least the way we treat it, we assume you cannot heat it up at that point. Okay, so again, bottom line is here, if you create a situation where you create a barrier between the food and the heat source, as sort of a further barrier, this is going to be something that will open the door to other opportunities to return food to the fire in ways that you may not even necessarily have to be careful about the conditions of chazar, which leads me back to the point. What did I say here? If you let's look at again, Pei Beis and Pei Gimel. There's Pei Beis talks about v'yizar shelo yasim k'deraso al gabe karka. You should be careful not to place it down on the ground. Why do they say be careful? Shouldn't he say it should be not allowed to put it down on the ground? You know what I'm saying? Why is it? You should just be careful. That's not a question here, Michael. Well, have to be very careful with everything. Use the oven mitts and whatever you. 100%. But here, there may be room. Sort of the door has been opened a little bit to say that the conditions of chazar are necessary. Remember what I'm saying? And I want to take a look with you here. You take a look at the Be'er Halacha. Let's take a look at the Be'er Halacha, and then we'll probably pause for today. Where he says where the star is. Star takes you down to where it says V'zaher Shelo Yasim. Okay, so he says here, De'im Hinichan. Everyone see that? Yeah. Everyone on Zoom see where I am there?
Yep.
I think this is an interesting point to focus on here. De'im Hinichan al gabe karka. If you do put it down, as we've said generally, you put it down on the ground. So when you want to put it on the fire, that's not called hazar anymore. Not returning it to the fire that was sort of, that it was on, sorry, kisharotza lahanicha acharka. When you put it on afterwards, ain't a shame chazar. It's not chazara. Uchatchilas hanachadamya. This is a new placing of this food. The asra filu alpi kira grufa ketuma, and generally we say that even if it's grufa ketuma, not allowed to place it in a space where people could say this is nirek himivashal. It looks like you're cooking, right? Even if it's grufa ketuma. Filu haramamo that the hanacha b'Shabbos lechatchila asra. The Rama agrees that placing something anew on Shabbos, even though it's cooked, right, is not allowed on Shabbos because it looks like you're cooking. And it looks like the mechaber, contradicts himself. Because the Lakaman b'Sifhei, we'll see when we get to Sifhei, Hetik Ladina as Divrei HaRashba. He quotes the Rashba as the halacha, Shehuva b'Beis Yosef, Hashem Haran Perek Kira, Shekasa b'Shmo Sham, as a Chad Gadya here of who said it, the mutter litain lechatchila b'Shabbos. You can place it anew on Shabbos. The afsha keder hatachtona omeres al ha'esh, even though the pot underneath stands upon the fire. Kevan she mafsekes umamid hakadera aleha ein derech bishul lekach. Since the pot underneath is on the fire, and this one is mafsik, and has another pot standing on top of it. This is not derech bishul lekach. This is not a way you cook. I have never, and neither, I will go on a limb to say, neither none of you have ever seen anybody cook with a pot on top of another pot. That you cooked it, not reheated it. That you saw someone cook a food on an oven, on a stovetop, where there was a pot and they took a second pot and they balanced it on top of this. And let's say it was easy to balance. Let's say you have two flat, no one's ever done that. It's not a normal way to cook. Even if, by the way, in theory, you could cook it that way. It's not normal. It's the absolutely abnormal. Ein derech bishul lekach. Va'adifa mikira grufa ketuma. That's better than grufa ketuma. This is, this looks, now you still need, now what I would add here though is you still need grufa ketuma because you don't want it to be able to adjust the temperature. So it's not to say that it's in place of grufa ketuma, but this is from the perspective of no one would make a mistake that this is big, that there's a bishul, this is a place that the bishul is taking place, currently. No one would make that mistake because you're literally cooking on top, you're placing it on top of another pot. That is not a normal way to cook.
I disagree.
A pot on top of a pot?
Do you ever use a double boiler? Use it all the time to melt chocolate, to make a custard. Anytime you don't want something that's delicate to hit the heat source, but you want to heat it up. You have a pot on top of another pot. They make specific things, double boilers for that.
Don't you put water in the first pot?
The difference is that the
We're going to
bottom,
get to that.
the bottom pot has water in it.
Yeah.
And the water is usually not boiling, but it's hot enough to heat the upper pot.
Right.
So even though you're telling me the bottom pot is going to be empty, our old friend Morris Ian is going to come in and say, you're using a double
Morris.
boiler on Shabbos.
So let me get this straight though. What kind of a food would be in the top pot in this scenario?
Whatever you want to heat gently.
But it's for heating, not cooking, right?
Oh, no, you cook. You can
can
cook a
cook it.
custard that way.
You can cook a custard that way.
That's because you don't want the eggs to
Right.
scramble. You want them to heat gently. So this guy was not a
learned-
chef.
I
What
learned
can I tell
I
you?
learned something today. Okay. Okay. So I stand correct that you can cook that way.
Yeah.
Which sorry, I did say that you can cook that way. I did say you can cook that way. I said it's not the normal way.
Okay.
Now, that may be, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are many foods that are made this way. But at the very least, I think we can all agree that this isn't the normal way to cook, right? On a double pot, though you're saying that they actually make
Oh, yeah.
specifically okay, that's an interesting problem to raise here. They're actually making these things it's not a contraption that people just kind of like came up with, like cute way to, I could do, make custard and it'll be the best way, but okay, wow, okay.
But there's a difference, which Hinda correctly points out is not seen, which is the bottom pot has water in it.
Right.
In the
Right.
case of a double boiler. Here, we're talking about a bottom pot that doesn't have anything in it.
It's empty.
No, I agree, but
You
again,
can't see that.
from our
That's the issue.
scientists, people walking by will have no idea that the bottom pot necessarily is empty.
Right. 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 I have to think about it on this line. But I think at the end of the day, though, we can agree, though, for the most part, unless you maybe disagree with me, but this is not the normal way. This isn't the typical way we would cook a food. Even if you're making custard, is that the typical way to make a custard?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that is, okay. All right, never mind.
90% of the food you make, it's not the way you make it. That's all.
Right, exactly.
Now we know who
It's
makes
not the way
custard.
I don't make custard.
That's
I make other
obvious.
foods. Anyways, okay, so we'll take it as face value for this. Ein derech mishul b'kach, at least in their day, or at least for the Mishnah Berurah. Va'adifa mikira gufet v'habi kamami neged hamadura demuter, and it's like putting food near a fire. That's like fine. After Shabbos, im hayam mevushal kol tzarka. Again, it has to be fully cooked. So skip over the brackets there. Matzasi v'dagol mervava shenidchak bazav because of the efshad ha'mechaber samach atzmo al svaras haran. Okay. Okay, so we'll maybe have to come back to this part, okay? Because he's going to talk about the panadish, which is the sif hay, which is the congealed food, and what happens when you reheat congealed food. But bottom line is here, you see that there's an acknowledgement here that it's not quite exactly your standard case of chazara already. And I think that he doesn't make this point explicitly, but I think when the Shulchan Aruch is v'zaher, I think he's acknowledging in some ways you should try to do this through the conditions of chazara, because it kind of looks like chazara, but maybe perhaps admitting here that this isn't a traditional chazara because ein derech bishul b'kach. You have has to be group of tuma for sure, but you have here a situation where it doesn't look like you're putting it back onto a heat source that is normal for cooking, which is why I've pointed out if you have a warming drawer or you have a warming tray, these are not normal ways to cook. And maybe even some of them you can't even possibly cook. But nonetheless, so in those cases, you have to cover the knobs and dials because you don't want them to be adjusted. But in terms of it looking like cooking, no one would make that mistake. So when you don't have that, the conditions of chazara by definition fall away because it's not chazara to a fire upon which we would normally cook. And that's why I think there's some more significance to the word zoher. You should be careful. Maybe I'm overreading this one. This is my own little diuk and my own inference in the language of the Shulchan Aruch. Take a look at Pei Beis and Pei Gimel just to finish it up, and then we'll call it a day. Shelo Yosim, you're not supposed to place it on the ground. As we talked about by the laws of Chazara. Okay, V'shetiyero tachas. It should be still boiling or at least hot. As we talked about previously. Does it have to be literally boiling? No. As long as it hasn't fully cooled down to room temperature, and then you're okay to return things to the fire. And so here you're okay too. But again, I think that there's going to be more room, as we will continue to see, that when things are not heated up in a place where bishul could take place, or bishul does not normally take place, this will be very helpful. And then when we get to sif hay, which is the next part of that be'er halacha he's about to make reference to, there he's going to say it's okay. It's mutar lases al pi kadera schamina put on top of a hot pot on Shabbos. Tafshash and his bashel me'erev Shabbos kol tzorko could go panadish. This congealed food in order to heat it up. Lafisha in derech bishul b'kach, because it's not normal to place food on top of food. And this sif hay, which is built a little bit off of sif gimel here, becomes the basis of the kedera, gabe kedera bach, which has water in it, right? Where you're allowed to, if you have the food that's heating up, no problem at all, from before Shabbos. Right? You can't do it on Shabbos because that's a problem of chazara, on directly. But if that thing was there direct, was there the whole Shabbos? And they sell these, kedera, gabe kedera blech. The bottom layer, almost like the way Hind is making it sound like with this pot, has water, boiling water. Okay, no problem. Second layer has a place where you can then put food to heat it up.
Those things get very, very hot.
And it can get very hot. You could, in theory, cook there, but nobody actually cooks there on a kedera gal, except now we've learned, apparently, because of Hinda, we're going to prohibit these things because apparently it is normal to cook there. I'm not saying that. We're starting to build the case here. I'm just setting the things up for future weeks. This is going to be why the way we reheat food on Shabbos, you maybe never had heard of these conditions of Chazara, because we circumvent them by these other halachic mechanisms. I'm not even going to call them halachic loopholes. It's halachic mechanisms. I don't think that we should feel like we're cheating the system. But when you use a warming tray or like a kedera gabi kedera blech, these are all going to be perfectly fine. Okay. Questions? Hopefully it's a good exercise for our brains, by the way.
Right.
Every Tuesday morning. This is not a simple topic. I promise you, it was not a simple topic. Sorry, what did you say, Steve?
I agree with you. It's very complicated.
I agree.
You
It
know.
is complicated.
Yeah, and again, so that's why I tried to, after we finished Chazar, to simplify. Most often Chazar is going to come up in our lives, cholant, or where you've been having something continuously heating up. Well, as we continue, we'll see the way that most of us probably reheat our food. Will be fine even without the conditions of Chazara. So we'll get there. We'll get there. Promise you, all your food's going to be warm when it comes Shabbos morning. Don't worry. All right. Have a good day, everybody.
That's a good